The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metal ocean. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds sat in their assigned places. Each species had their own section, marked by glowing symbols that showed their rank and power. The oldest species sat closest to the center stage. The newest ones sat far away, in the shadows. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked slowly across the polished floor. Her simple black uniform looked plain next to the bright robes and shining armor worn by other delegates. Behind her walked two other humans. They moved quietly, their faces calm, but their eyes watching everything. Today was the day humans had waited for. After 30 years of being junior members, Earth finally asked to join the Galactic Council as full members. Humans had earned this right through blood and sweat. They built hospitals on dying worlds. They fought pirates in the outer systems. They shared their technology freely with anyone who asked. Sarah remembered the mining disaster on Kepler 7. Human rescue teams worked for 6 days straight to save trapped Veltar workers. She thought about the plague that almost killed the entire Benthan race. Human doctors found the cure and gave it away for free. When the crystal beings of Ethereal faced starvation, human ships brought food across dangerous space routes. The Speaker of the Council stood up. Zethkrai was an Altarian, one of the oldest species in known space. His blue skin glowed with age marks that showed he had lived for over 500 years. Golden rings around his forearms told everyone about his high rank and ancient family line. "Today we decide the fate of the human request," Zethkrai said. His voice echoed through the hall without any machines to help it. "The species from the third planet of the Sol system asks to become full members of our council." Sarah felt her heart beat faster. Around the hall, thousands of alien eyes turned to look at her. Some looked curious, others looked bored. A few looked annoyed, as if this whole meeting was wasting their time. "The humans have been with us for 30 standard years," Zethkrai continued. "In that time, they have shown energy and enthusiasm. However, wisdom comes only with age. The human species is still very young. They think with their emotions instead of pure logic. They make quick decisions without thinking about long-term effects." The Veltar delegate stood up. His gray skin was covered with the mathematical symbols that showed his high intelligence. "The humans are unstable," he said in a voice like cold wind. "They feel anger, sadness, and joy too strongly. These emotions cloud their judgment. How can we trust important decisions to beings who cry at sad stories?" Sarah wanted to speak, but the rules said she had to wait until all others finished talking. A delegate from the Ethereal Collective floated up from her seat. She looked like living crystal, beautiful but hard to understand. "Humans have primitive brains," she said in a voice like singing glass. "Their neural networks are chaotic and inefficient. They waste mental energy on things like art and music, instead of focusing on pure thought." One by one, the ancient species of the galaxy spoke. They all said the same thing in different ways. Humans were too young, too emotional, too primitive. They needed more time to grow up. Maybe in another 100 years, they could try again. The Benthan delegate surprised Sarah the most. She had personally helped save their homeworld from the plague. She had held dying Benthan children in her arms and worked without sleep to find medicine that would help them. Now the Benthan just sat quietly and said nothing. When the voting began, Sarah already knew what would happen. The numbers appeared on the giant screen above the speaker's platform. 847 species voted to reject humanity's request. Only 23 voted to accept them. 156 species chose not to vote at all. Zethkrai looked down at Sarah with what might have been kindness. "The Council has decided. Humanity will remain under our guidance as protected members. You will keep all the benefits you have now, but you are not ready for the responsibilities of full membership. This decision is final and fair." Sarah stood up slowly. The huge hall became completely quiet. Everyone waited to see what the human would do. Would she cry? Would she shout in anger? Would she make threats? Instead, Sarah spoke in a calm, steady voice that carried clearly to every corner of the hall. The United Colonies of Humanity acknowledges the Council's decision. We thank you for your time and consideration. We will be withdrawing our delegations to review our position and decide our next steps. Known. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her two companions followed without saying a word. Their footsteps echoed in the silent hall. Zethkree waved his hand in a gesture that meant the meeting was finished. He was already thinking about the next item on his agenda. The human problem was solved. They would complain for a while, then accept their place like every other young species had done before them. But as Sarah reached the door, she stopped and looked back one more time. Her eyes met Zethkree's across the vast distance of the hall. For just a moment, the ancient speaker felt something he had not felt in many years. It was uncertainty. Then the humans were gone, and the hall filled with the noise of delegates talking about more important matters. Nobody noticed that the three humans had not looked sad or angry. They had looked determined. Within hours, messages were flying to every human colony and station across the galaxy. The withdrawal had begun. The message reached every human outpost at the same time. It was simple and clear. Come home. Dr. Lisa Park was working late in her laboratory on Station Omega when her communication device beeped. She read the message twice, then looked around at her research. For 5 years, she had been working with Veltar scientists to develop new medicine. Tomorrow, they were supposed to test a cure for a disease that killed millions across the galaxy each year. She started packing her personal items. "What are you doing?" asked Dr. Kethvar, her Veltar partner. His gray skin showed the blue patterns that meant confusion. "I'm going home," Lisa said simply. She carefully removed the human-made computer that contained all her research notes. "But we're so close to finishing the project," Kethvar said. "This medicine could save countless lives." Lisa paused in her packing. "The research will continue. You have all the data we collected together. The parts I developed alone." She shrugged. "Those were my contributions to the partnership." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human engineers quietly shut down their workstations and packed their tools. Human traders finished their current delivery contracts, but refused to sign new ones. Human diplomats cleaned out their offices and sent polite goodbye messages to their contacts. On the trade moon of Xeris 7, Merchant Prince Tholan watched human cargo ships lift off from his spaceport. His purple skin turned darker with worry. "Where are they going?" he asked his assistant. "Back to human space, sir," came the reply. "All of them." Tholan tried to call Captain Rodriguez, who had been running cargo through the dangerous Maelstrom sector for 10 years. The call went unanswered. He tried calling the human shipping company that handled 60% of his business. Their office was closed. The galaxy's news networks treated it like entertainment. "Humans throw galactic tantrum," read one headline. "Emotional species proves council." "Right," said another. Talk shows across dozens of worlds made jokes about human pride and childish behavior. But some people noticed details that were not funny. Admiral Yith Al of the Altarian Navy was reviewing fleet reports when something caught his attention. The humans had not abandoned the joint military base on Frontier Station. Instead, they had carefully removed only the equipment they had brought with them. The fusion reactors that powered the base were still running, but the control systems that made them efficient were gone. "How much of our fleet coordination depends on human systems?" he asked his staff. The answer worried him. Human computer networks handled communication between different alien ship designs. Human logistics officers planned supply runs through dangerous space. Human tactical advisors had written most of the current combat manuals. On the research station where Dr. Kethvar worked, experiments began failing. The quantum computer that processed complex calculations stopped working when Lisa Park's security codes were removed. The biosamples that had been kept stable for months started dying when the human-designed life support systems were taken away. "I don't understand," Kethvar told his supervisor. Dr. Park said she left all the shared data. But nothing works anymore. His supervisor, an older Veltar with many decades of experience, looked at the failed experiments with growing alarm. Perhaps the data was not the most important part, he said quietly. The Benthans discovered their problem 3 weeks after the humans left. Their planetary defense system, built with human help after their homeworld almost died, began showing warning lights. Critical systems were failing one by one. The Benthan engineer tried to fix the problems using the technical manuals the humans had provided. But the manuals assumed knowledge that the Benthans did not have. They described what to do, but not why it worked, or how to solve new problems. When the shield generators that protected their major cities went offline, the Benthan government sent desperate messages to every human colony they could find. The messages came back with automatic replies. The United Colonies of Humanity are currently reviewing their galactic relationships. We will respond to all communications after this review is complete. 6 months after the Council vote, humanity had vanished from galactic civilization. Their colonies still existed, but they no longer answered calls from non-human species. Their trade ships no longer traveled the major space routes. Their scientists no longer attended conferences or shared research. It was as if 3 billion humans had simply decided to stop talking to the rest of the galaxy. The economic effects started small. A trade route became too dangerous to use without human escort ships. A research project stalled because human creativity was needed to solve a complex problem. A diplomatic crisis went unsolved because human mediators were no longer available. Speaker Zethkri noticed the problems in his monthly reports, but he was not worried. Young species always caused some disruption when they learned their place in the galactic order. The problems would solve themselves in time. But Captain Wei Zhang, formerly of the Council Defense Force and now commanding a human exploration ship, was not sitting idle. Far beyond the borders of Council space, he was meeting with species that the Council had never bothered to contact. Small colonies that had been overlooked. Refugee groups that had been ignored. Independent traders who lived in the empty spaces between the great powers. "We're not running away," he told his crew, as their ship approached a system where crystal beings lived on floating islands in space. "We're finding friends who value friendship." Lepin. The crystal beings had been rejected by the Council years ago for being too primitive. But when Captain Zhang offered to trade human food for their beautiful artwork, they welcomed him with joy. When his ship's doctor helped treat their sick children, they offered him a place in their floating cities. Word spread through the forgotten corners of the galaxy. The humans were back, but they were different now. They were not trying to join anyone else's club. They were building their own. And they were not building it alone. The alarm bells rang across Nexus Prime at exactly 0347 station time. Speaker Zethkri was pulled from his sleep by the emergency signal that had not sounded in 50 years. "The Devourers have returned," his aide said breathlessly. Zethkri felt his blood turn cold. The Devourers were nightmare creatures from outside the galaxy. They ate entire worlds, turning planets into empty husks. 50 years ago, they had invaded through a tier in space near the outer spiral. Only a massive defense led by human Admiral Marcus Webb had stopped them. "How many ships?" Zethkri asked, as he rushed to the command center. "Hundreds, sir. Maybe thousands. They're pouring through the same dimensional rift." In the command center, holographic displays showed the invasion fleet. The Devourer ships looked like living creatures made of metal and flesh. They moved in swarms, attacking from all directions at once. Admiral Yithal stood before the main display, his 4 arms moving rapidly as he coordinated the defense. "All Council fleets are moving to intercept," he reported. "We have 700 ships responding to the threat." Zethkri nodded. 700 ships was a massive force, but as he watched the battle unfold on the screens, he felt a growing sense of dread. The Council fleets moved in perfect formation, just as they had been trained for thousands of years. Each ship knew its exact position. Each captain followed the ancient rules of space combat. It was beautiful, orderly, and completely ineffective. The devourers attacked like wild animals. They came from above and below, from the sides and straight ahead. When Council ships tried to form defensive lines, the devourers split into smaller groups and attacked from behind. When the Council ships chased them, the devourers suddenly joined together and destroyed their pursuers. They're not following any logical attack pattern, Admiral Ythal said in confusion. How can we defend against tactics that make no sense? Zethkri remembered something Admiral Webb had said during the First Devourer War. Logic is predictable. In war, predictable means dead. The first battle was a disaster. The Council lost 40 ships and barely scratched the Devourer fleet. The alien swarm moved on to attack the mining world of Kepler-7. Without human rescue teams, the evacuation of Kepler-7 took too long. 3 million Veltar miners died when the planet's surface was stripped away by Devourer harvesting beams. The second battle went even worse. Council ships tried to adapt by changing their formation, but they changed too slowly. The Devourers seemed to learn and evolve their tactics every few hours. By the time the Council figured out how to counter one attack method, the Devourers were using 3 new ones. Dr. Kethvar watched the news reports from his damaged laboratory. Without human help, his research had stalled completely. The medicine that could save millions was still months away from completion. Now it might never be finished. The humans always said we needed to think outside the box, he told his assistant. I never understood what they meant. On Xeris 7, merchant Prince Tholan watched his business empire crumble. Without human ships willing to brave the dangerous routes, his supply chains had broken down. His warehouses were full of goods he could not deliver. His customers were buying from competitors who still had working relationships with human traders. The economic collapse was spreading. The Kepler Trade Consortium, which had been run by humans, had handled 30% of all galactic commerce. Without their innovative financial systems, trade between distant worlds became slow and expensive. Scientific research was failing across the galaxy. Projects that had depended on human creativity and willingness to try impossible things were shutting down. The Ethereals, with their perfect crystal minds, could solve any problem that followed logical rules. But they could not make the intuitive leaps that led to real breakthroughs. Dr. Silona, the galaxy's leading expert on faster-than-light communication, stared at equations that should have worked, but did not. She had all the mathematical knowledge needed. She had access to the most advanced computers. But something was missing. She remembered her human colleague, Dr. James Wright, who had left 6 months ago. James was not as smart as she was, according to all standard tests. But he had a strange ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos. He could look at a problem from angles that made no logical sense and somehow find the answer. Intuition, he had called it. Sometimes you have to feel the math instead of just thinking it. She had thought he was being silly. Now she was beginning to understand. The Benthan homeworld fell on the 18th day of the invasion. Their human-designed defense grid had finally failed completely, and they had no way to fix it. The crystal cities that floated in their purple seas were consumed by devourer ships. Only those Benthans who had already fled to other worlds survived. Speaker Zethkri stood in the council chambers, looking out at the half-empty seats. 17 species had already evacuated their delegations from Nexus Prime. The remaining members argued loudly about what to do next. We need to contact the humans, said the Veltar representative. They are the only ones who know how to fight the devourers effectively. Absolutely not, replied the ethereal delegate. We cannot show such weakness. We are the older, wiser species. We will solve this problem ourselves. But they were not solving it. Every day brought news of more defeats, more dead worlds, more refugees fleeing the devourer advance. The ancient, logical military tactics that had worked for thousands of years were useless against an enemy that followed no rules. Zethkri thought about the last time he had seen Ambassador Sarah Chen. She had walked out of these chambers with dignity, not anger. She had not threatened them or demanded revenge. She had simply left. Now he was beginning to understand why that had been so frightening. "Sir." His aide approached carefully. "We've received intelligence reports from the outer colonies. The humans. They're not hiding." "What do you mean?" "They've formed some kind of confederation beyond our borders. They're working with refugee species, colony groups that never joined the council. And, sir," the aide hesitated, "they appear to have allies we've never encountered before." Zethkri felt something he had not experienced in his long life. Fear. Not fear of the Devourers, though they were terrible enough. Fear that the galaxy's oldest and wisest species had made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had dismissed the humans as children. But children grow up. And sometimes, when they do, they decide they no longer need their parents. The search ships left Nexus Prime in secret, carrying the most desperate mission in galactic history. Speaker Zethkri had chosen his best diplomats and his most advanced vessels. They had one job: find humanity and beg for help. The first ship searched the abandoned human colonies near Council space. They found empty stations and silent worlds, but no people. The humans had not destroyed anything when they left. They had simply taken their families and disappeared. The second ship followed old trade routes to the edge of known space. They found traces of human activity, fuel stops, repair stations, cargo manifests, but the trails always led to nowhere. It was the third ship that finally found what they were looking for. Captain Velmira was an experienced Altarian scout who had explored more unknown systems than any other pilot alive. When her sensors detected an artificial signal coming from a star system beyond the galactic rim, she almost ignored it. The signal was too weak, too far away to be anything important. But she was desperate, so she followed it. What she found changed everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. The system contained 12 planets, but only 3 were natural. The other 9 were clearly artificial worlds, built using technology she did not recognize. Space stations the size of moons orbited each planet. Ships moved between them in patterns that showed careful coordination and planning. "This is Scout Ship Times, Seeker Times, requesting communication with local authorities." Captain Velmira transmitted in standard galactic language. The response came immediately, in perfect Altarian. "Scout Ship Times, Seeker **. You are welcome in Confederation space. Please follow the beacon to New Geneva Station for diplomatic processing." The beacon led her to a massive station that dwarfed anything the Council had built. But what shocked her most was not the size of the station. It was the variety of ships docked there. She recognized some designs: human, Kthari, and the crystal ships of the singing people from Melodia. But there were dozens of others she had never seen before. Ship designs that looked like they came from entirely different traditions of space travel. At the docking bay, she was met by a human woman in a simple blue uniform. "Captain Velmira," the woman said with a smile. "I'm Commander Sarah Park. Welcome to the Terran Confederation." "Are you related to Dr. Lisa Park?" Velmira asked. The name seemed familiar. "My sister," Sarah replied. "She's working on the new medical center on Harmony World. She's made remarkable progress with her research, by the way. The medicine she was developing is now saving lives across 36 systems." As they walked through the station, Velmira tried to understand what she was seeing. The corridors were filled with beings from many different species, but they all wore the same simple uniforms. They worked together in mixed groups, human and alien side by side. "How many species belong to this confederation?" she asked. 47 as full members," Sarah answered. "Another 23 as associate partners. And we have trade agreements with over 100 independent colonies." Velmira stopped walking. "That's impossible. The Council has contacted every spacefaring species in the galaxy." Sarah's smile was sad but not unkind. The Council contacted every species they considered worth talking to. There were many others they ignored. They entered a conference room where a human man was waiting. He was older than Sarah, with gray hair and calm eyes. When he stood up, Velmira recognized him immediately. "Admiral Marcus Webb," she said in surprise. "Just Wei Zhang now," he replied. I retired from military service when humanity left Council space. These days, I work in diplomacy. Velmira delivered her message as quickly as she could. The Devourers were destroying everything. The Council fleets could not stop them. Millions were dying. The galaxy needed human help, desperately. Admiral Zhang listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. The Council rejected humanity's request for membership, he said finally. They said we were too young, too emotional, too primitive. What has changed? We were wrong, Velmira said. It was hard to admit, but it was true. We need your help. And if we help you defeat the Devourers, Zhang asked, what happens then? Do humans go back to being junior partners, under Council guidance? Velmira did not have an answer for that question. Zhang showed her around the Confederation worlds over the next 3 days. What she saw amazed and troubled her. The humans had not spent their exile in bitterness and isolation. They had built something new. On Harmony World, she met Cathari refugees, whose original homeworld had been consumed by its dying star. The Council had been too busy with other matters to help them evacuate. Human ships had saved 3 billion Cathari and given them new worlds to rebuild their civilization. On the crystal cities of New Melodia, she heard the singing people perform music that combined their natural harmonics with human instruments. The Council had rejected their membership application because their technology was too primitive. The humans had helped them develop new science that used sound waves in ways she had never imagined. Most shocking of all were the species she had never seen before. The void swimmers, who lived in the empty space between galaxies. The phase walkers, who could move through dimensions. The gardener fleets, who cultivated life on dead worlds. They were always there, Admiral Zhang explained. But the Council never looked for them. Your people only contacted species that were already powerful and advanced. We looked for species that needed help. On the final day of her visit, Velmira was invited to observe a Confederation Council meeting. Unlike the grand chambers on Nexus Prime, this room was simple and comfortable. Representatives from dozens of species sat in a circle, each voice carrying equal weight. The topic was her request for military aid against the Devourers. The Council species are not our enemies, said a Cathari representative. But they are also not our friends. Why should we risk our fleets to save people who would not save us? A human delegate disagreed. Innocent people are dying. That alone is reason enough to act. The debate continued for hours. Some species wanted to help immediately. Others wanted to stay neutral. A few suggested offering aid only to individual worlds, not to the Council government. Finally, Admiral Zhang stood up. I propose a compromise. We will share the location of Confederation space with the Council. Any species or world that wishes to join us in real cooperation will be welcome. But we will not save a government that sees other beings as inferior. The vote was close, but the proposal passed. Admiral Zhang turned to Captain Velmira. You may tell Speaker Zethkri that the Terran Confederation is willing to meet with Council representatives. But we will meet as equals, not as subjects seeking approval from their betters. And if the Council refuses? She asked. Zhang's expression was sad but determined. Then, the Council will face the Devourers alone, while 47 species, who could have been their allies, build a better future without them. As Captain Velmira prepared to leave, Sarah Park gave her one final message to carry back. Tell the Council that humanity remembers every species that voted against us. But we also remember every species that abstained instead of supporting us. And we remember the ones who voted for us when everyone else was against us. How we work together in the future will depend on how honestly they can examine their past. The journey back to Council space felt longer than the trip out. Velmira carried with her the weight of what she had learned. Humanity had not just survived their rejection by the Council. They had thrived. And they had done it by building the kind of galactic community that the Council claimed to represent but had never actually created. Now the question was whether the ancient species of the galaxy could swallow their pride long enough to learn from the children they had dismissed. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any meeting in galactic history. Speaker Zethkri looked out at seats that had been empty for weeks. Many species had evacuated their delegates when the Devourer attacks grew worse. Others had simply stopped participating in council meetings. The gallery where citizens usually watched was packed with refugees from destroyed worlds. They had come to demand answers from the government that had failed to protect them. The Terran Confederation has made an offer, Zethkri announced to the assembled delegates. They will provide military assistance against the Devourers, but only under specific conditions. He read Admiral Zhang's message aloud. The Confederation will meet with council representatives to discuss cooperation between our governments. However, we will meet as equals. Any agreement must include fundamental reforms to council structure and an acknowledgement that the rejection of humanity's membership application was unjust. The response was immediate chaos. Delegates shouted at each other in dozens of languages. The older species were outraged at the demand for an apology. The younger species were desperate enough to agree to anything. Thanks for watching. This is blackmail, declared the ethereal representative, her crystal body glowing with anger. They are taking advantage of our crisis to force political changes. They are offering to save us, replied the Benthan delegate quietly. My homeworld is gone. My people are scattered refugees. If admitting we were wrong can prevent more deaths, then I will admit it gladly. The debate raged for hours. Some delegates accused humanity of opportunism and greed. Others pointed out that the humans were under no obligation to help the council at all. After being rejected and humiliated, Dr. Kethvar, now serving as a temporary Veltar representative, stood up to speak. I worked with humans for 5 years, he said. I thought their emotional nature made them weak. I was wrong. Their emotions made them care about people they had never met. When my research station was attacked by pirates, human ships came to help us even though they received no payment. When the plague struck Rigel colony, human doctors worked without rest to save alien children. He paused, his gray skin showing the blue patterns of shame. We called them primitive because they felt sadness when others suffered. We said they were unstable because they felt joy when they succeeded. But emotions are not weakness. Emotions are what make someone care enough to help strangers. The real crisis came when Admiral Zhang's next message reached not just the Council, but every inhabited world in known space. It was broadcast on all communication networks, translated into hundreds of languages. Citizens of the galaxy, the message began. The Terran Confederation offers aid to any world threatened by the Devourers. We offer membership to any species committed to cooperation and equality. We offer sanctuary to any people fleeing oppression or disaster. You do not need permission from the Council to contact us. You do not need to be powerful or ancient to join us. You need only to believe that all thinking beings deserve respect and freedom. The response was immediate and devastating to Council authority. 17 species formally announced they were leaving the Council to join the Confederation. 43 individual worlds declared independence from their home governments. The major trade guilds began moving their operations to Confederation space. Zethkri watched his civilization crumble in real time. Species that had been loyal council members for thousands of years were walking away. Young civilizations that had dreamed of council membership were choosing the human confederation instead. Sir, his aide reported nervously, the Veltar High Council has voted to open negotiations with the Confederation. The Altarian Senate is debating a similar measure. Even some of our own colonial governors are asking for permission to contact human representatives. That night, Zethkri received a personal message from Ambassador Sarah Chen. She invited him to a private meeting on neutral ground, not as representatives of rival governments, but as two beings who had seen the best and worst of galactic civilization. They met in a simple garden on the human world of New Geneva. Chen was older now, her hair touched with gray, but her eyes still held the same calm strength he remembered from that day in the council chambers. You came, she said, gesturing to a bench under flowering trees. I had no choice. Zethkri replied. My civilization is falling apart. No, Chen said gently. Your civilization is changing. That's not the same thing. They talked through the night about the mistakes that had led to this crisis. Zethkri admitted that the council had become too focused on maintaining their power, instead of serving their people. Chen acknowledged that humanity could have tried harder to work within the existing system. What do you want from us? Zethkri asked finally. We want what we always wanted, Chen replied. To be treated as equals. To have our contributions valued. To build something better together. And if the council admits we were wrong about humanity, then we can start working on the things that really matter. Stopping the devourers. Helping refugee species. Exploring the galaxy together. Building a civilization based on cooperation instead of hierarchy. The Treaty of Seoul was signed 6 months later in the same garden where Zethkri and Chen had talked. The agreement formally acknowledged that the Council's rejection of humanity had been unjust and committed both governments to fundamental reforms. The Council would restructure itself as a confederation of equal members rather than a hierarchy based on age and power. The Confederation would share its military innovations and coordinate with Council forces against the Devourers. The war against the Devourers ended 3 weeks after the first joint Human Council fleet engaged the enemy. The ancient species provided massive firepower and perfect coordination. The humans provided tactical flexibility and the ability to adapt quickly to changing conditions. Together, they were unstoppable. But the real victory was not military. It was the transformation of galactic civilization itself. Zethkri stood in the new council chamber, looking at the circular arrangement of seats where every voice carried equal weight. There were no special places for older species, no distant corners for the newly arrived. Human delegates sat next to Altarian senators. Cathari refugees worked alongside ethereal crystals. Ambassador Chen, now representing the Terran Confederation as an equal member, was listening to a proposal from a species that would have been rejected as too primitive under the old system. The Moss people grew forests that could clean the atmosphere of dead worlds. Under the old rules, their simple technology would have disqualified them from membership. Under the new system, their contribution to galactic healing made them valuable partners. The vote on accepting the Moss people as full members, Zethkri announced, is unanimous. After the session, Chen approached him with a smile. How does it feel to be part of something better? Zethkri considered the question. The new system was messier than the old one. Decisions took longer when every voice had to be heard. There was more debate, more disagreement, more chaos. But there was also more laughter in the halls, more innovation in the research centers, more hope among the refugee camps, more species asking to join every month. It feels like we finally grew up, he said.